Johnny, at any point yesterday, did you feel like you were going to miss the ship?
Yes.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Lido, Loca, and I'm here with some Pier Runner Drama for your face. Let me set the stage a little bit. The three main players in our story is myself, Tony B, La Lido Loca. Player number 2 is my friend John the Rooster Clayco from the Ship Show, aka Johnny Stylish. And player number 3 is the myth, the legend, and the man, Tommy Casabona from the Always Be Booked Cruise Podcast, aka Tommy Boats. Now, here's the scenario. The real deal is that Tommy Boats was hosting a group cruise on the Royal Caribbean Allure of the Seas to the Southern Caribbean. And myself and John from the Ship Show, we hatched a plan back in March of 2022 to interject ourselves into the Pirates and Pier Runners group cruise with a big Fort Lauderdale surprise to our virtual friend Tommy, and it all went off without a hitch. We surprised Tommy. It was a great first meeting, and then we all went cruising together without really, we had some idea what was to be expected because Tommy is very open on his podcast, the Always Be Booked Podcast, about what his cruise life is, and we've talked to him before on this show. He's made no bones about it that he will run the pier. He wants to get the very most out of every port day, and getting the very most is squeezing the full amount of time out of that port stop, and sometimes that puts him in jeopardy for missing the ship. And well, it's not a lie. I'm here to attest it's not a lie. Now, again, 3 perspectives. My perspective, Johnny Stylish, Tommy Boats. I stayed on the ship for these stops. We went to Labadee, we went to Curacao, we went to Aruba, and I stayed on because I'd been to Labadee and I had yet to go to Aruba and Curacao with my lovely wife, Jenny B. And so I was waiting until a cruise coming up soon to do those stops. And so I was the guy running point on the cruise ship, and I would post up on these days that they went off the ship at the cabin so that I would be there when everybody got back, or at least I was sharing a cabin with Johnny. And so that's where I was at on Labadee Day, and this was the first indication that there could be trouble on the cruise, because on Labadee Day, which is a very easy cruise port to get back on the cruise ship from, not many things to slow you down, I got a phone call from security asking me why John was not yet on the ship, even though it was the all aboard time. And well, that was disconcerting, but it was just a quick, simple phone call. Is John in the cabin? No, he's not. Did you see him today? Last time I saw him is when he went to Labadee. And then like 15 minutes later, he popped up in the cabin. All was well that ended well. The next stop was Aruba, and while it was a fun day, there was no drama. Everybody was back on the cruise ship on time, but then things took a turn to the south when it came to Curacao Day, the last port stop of the cruise, when both John and Tommy they almost missed the cruise ship. Now, I know that could seem exaggerated, that could seem hyperbolistic. Oh yeah, they really were going to miss the cruise ship. Well, I think they were. Again, this was the first time I ever had this perspective. I was the person in the cabin fielding phone calls from security as decisions were being made whether or not to close the doors on my friends John and Tommy. How do I know that decision process was in process? Well, the basis of the phone calls. Let me set the stage. It was about 4:10 and the all aboard time was 4:30. John and I had a dinner reservation at 6. I wanted to pop into the shower, and I popped into the shower around 4:15, and when I got out of the shower, it was close to 4:30. It was close to the all aboard time, and as I was getting, ready from my shower, the phone rang. I picked up the phone, and it was a very similar call to the one in Labadee. Hey, is John in the cabin? No, John is not in the cabin. Have you seen him? No, I have not seen him. We do not show that John is back on the cruise ship. It's the all aboard time. Can you try to message John? I'll try to message John. That was the end of phone call number 1. I messaged John. Hey man, where are you at? No sooner had I sent that message, there was phone call number 2. It was a different security person. Hey, do you know that your cabin mate John is not currently on the ship and it's past the all aboard time? That's when the questions started flying. Question number 1, does John have his passport? And question number 2, is John on any medication? I didn't really have an answer for either question. I was pretty certain that John had his passport, but I don't know his medical history. The guy on the phone said, can you check the safe for his passport? I said, sure, I'll check the safe for his passport. I set the phone down. I went, his passport was not in the safe. I went back and I relayed that message, and he said, okay, good. It sounds like he has his passport. I told him again I didn't know anything about his medicine. I hung up the phone, and no sooner had I hung up the phone comes phone call number 3. It was from the first guy that called me. Did you get a message back from John? I did not get a message back from John. He asked me, does John have his passport? Is John on any medications? I told him the same answers as the other person, hung up the phone, and then another phone call came from another person saying, hey, is John back on the ship? Does he have his passport? Does he have medicine? I answered those questions. I hung up the phone, and as I hung up the phone, I could hear the announcement in the hall, John Clayco and Tommy Casabona, please come to guest services. And look, at this point, based on those conversations, I was almost certain that they had made the decision to keep those guys off of the cruise ship. And I kicked into panic mode a little bit. I started doing, I'm like, well, they can fly to the next port. Well, the next port was back to Fort Lauderdale. The cruise was basically over in 2 days. And so with that in mind, selfishly, I was looking around the cabin going, man, I'm going to have to pack all this stuff up. If you know John from the ship show, the guy has a lot of stuff with him, a lot of hats, a lot of clothes. And so selfishly, you know, I was worried about my friend John. I figured he could take care of himself out there in Curacao, plus he would be with Tommy. So, you know, I was like, oh, wow, I'm going to have to pack up this whole cabin. I know it's a little selfish, but fortunately I didn't have to worry about that because about 15 minutes later, about 4:45, 15 minutes after the all aboard, Johnny Stylish pops his head through the door. He had a look of concern on his face, and he was back. And then that's really when the drama began. It became a tale of who made them almost miss the cruise ship.
Freaking Tommy! It's his fault!
I did not know John also had a stop. What do you mean?
Really a he said versus a he said. And look, we got to get into that, but before we get there, let me quickly invite you to subscribe. If you like staying up to date with everything that's going on in cruising, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. Hit the subscribe button. Some people said their notification bell is unrung, so check your subscribe button, your notification bell. Don't miss out on these episodes. Thank you in advance. Here's the drama. Johnny comes back and he tells a tale of woe, really. A tale of making decisions that didn't work out right. Should we take a cab? Should we walk back? None of that really matters. The reality is they got back to the pier and there was some delay. You know, from where you could see the cruise ship, they didn't go directly to the cruise ship. You know, John basically said that it wasn't really his fault that they were the last ones to get back to the cruise ship. And then interestingly, our friend Tommy Casabona for the Always Be Booked Cruise Podcast, 2 cruise podcasts a week, make sure you go check that out. He also has a Patreon where he does a daily show, and on his Patreon daily recap from the next day when I listened to it, he basically said that the blame was on John and John's desire to get this miracle shoulder cream. And so after hearing that podcast, I was conflicted. I was looking at my friend John there across the room, you know, surrounded by his hats. I was looking at John like, well, you said it was Tommy, but Tommy said it was you. Where's the truth at? And that's where my investigative journalism began, and I spent the whole day trying to figure out the he said versus he said, and finally, after a great lunch at Sabor there on the boardwalk on the Lure of the Seas, I was able to get the story out of Johnny Stylish and Tommy Boats. Was it shots, or was it shoulder cream? Let's go to the past. All right, my friends here, Tommy Boats, Johnny Stylish, almost missed, I'm saying they almost missed the ship yesterday. Based on my side of the conversation, what really happened out there on the pier? What happened in those trenches?
From my point of view, it was a clear pier run. It absolutely happened. The issue is that, yes, I did stop. There was a couple of perfectly functioning bars that were on our way that I did stop at, like I do. That's just what happens.
I think it was 3.
Yeah, so when there's a pier run, I have it timed out. I know what the clock is. I did not know John also had a stop. What do you mean?
Now, see, here's where I take umbrage with this whole thing. That's why I wanted to take a taxi in the first place, because I needed to pick up some green shoulder cream.
So, Tommy, at any point yesterday, did you think you were going to miss the ship?
There was never a danger of missing the ship. I am an experienced pier runner. I know what we're doing. I know this offends and pisses people off a little bit, so if that's the role I got to play it. But I know when we're good. John, let me ask you, was the ship tied up?
Yes, it was.
The ship was tied up. We were in no danger.
Johnny, at any point yesterday, did you feel like you were going to miss the ship?
Yes. The whole time.
I hear a lot of talking here, but there's really only one answer to the question. Who made the last stop before you returned to the ship?
It was me. It was me. It was me. It was me.
Thanks for coming.
Somebody call off Chris Hansen. This mystery's been solved. It's a simple binary transaction. If you're the last person to stop before you get back to the ship, well, it's on you. I think that Tommy Boats is in the clear. Sorry, Johnny Stylish. It's just the way it goes. There you have it. Much like a house of cards falls under the least amount of pressure, Johnny Stylish gave himself up quick. Look, have you ever run the pier? Have you ever been the person on the ship? I would love to hear your story. And if you want to know exactly what happens when the cruise ship leaves you behind, well, I covered it in that video there. Check that out next. This is Tony for Lido Loca, and until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido.